Uh, Thank you very much. I thank the organizers for inviting me to speak at these sessions. And I also welcome all of you uh, for this wonderful field that is open to us as Christians. So, greetings from Assam in Northeast India. As you know, we are a little bit to the east of Bangladesh, and this is the Barak Valley, Barak River, which is there in the southern half of Assam, and a very forested campus in which we live. So the theme verse is really wonderful, isn't it? And we pray that through all these sessions, we may be men and women who have understood the times, and we know what we should do, not only with our lives, but with our departments, our institutions, whichever place God has put us in. So I like to briefly talk about myself and the work here, because I will be using several references to what has happened in the coming sessions. So that is a photograph of me and my wife shortly after we were married, and just before we set out to move to the present place at Makunda. So I have called it as a journey of faith. My only qualification to take such a session is that I accepted God's hand and let Him take me and take us to where He wanted us to go. And I feel all of us have that qualification, whatever be our age, whatever be our qualification, whether we are students, doctors, nurses, paramedicals. If we are willing to take God's hand of invitation, we too can go where He wants and do great things, because it is He working through our lives, through our feet and hands and mind and body. So I was actually an accidental doctor, and maybe some of you are also people like me. I joined medical college in 1981 in Chennai because I was beaten up and thrown out of the first floor of an engineering college hostel. So that was my first love, to be an electronics engineer, but God had other plans. So maybe some of you are wondering, why am I in this place as a medical student or as a nurse or as a paramedical worker or in a very difficult hospital? So please remember that God has put you there. And if he in His infinite wisdom thought it wise to put you there, then through Him something wonderful can happen. So that is what I did. I took up that opportunity and soon did very well in my medical college. And we had a Bible study group in our college, and we used to discuss many things. Every fourth week, we had a taking stock meeting. And one of the frequent discussion points was, what will you do with your life? I was interested in cardiology because I admired the cardiologists in our hospital. And sometimes we make our choices because we like somebody and we want to be like them. And I thought maybe I should go abroad, study well, and maybe come back some years later. But all that changed one day when I read this passage. I think most of us have read Jeremiah 29 verse 11, which says, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. But rarely do we read the next two verses. So suddenly I understood that I had placed before God my wishes and asked Him to bless it, as opposed to asking God, what do you want me to do with my life? And that was why I could not hear His still small voice. So when I thought about God's will, it was not clear to me, because my will was overshadowing whatever He wanted to speak. But when I understood that God has wonderful plans for me, much better than the plans I had made for myself, then I started asking, what exactly do you want me to do? And it says, you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and you will find me when you seek me with all your heart. So soon it became very obvious to me that I should not be working in the southern part of India, because the 4 states at the southernmost part are really well, what can you say, very good healthcare facilities are available. Whereas when we start moving to the north of India, things become really bad. So I should go to a place far away. So I started asking, exactly where do you want me to go? And this was what I got. So I felt God was telling me, go to a place where you, along with whatever I have given you, your life, your knowledge, the skills, whatever I have given, where you will be of the greatest transformational impact. So then I started wondering, which place would that be? And I thought, logically, it should be the place which has the largest population divided by the lowest resources. And by resources, I mean other people like me, me and my wife. So I was looking for a place which was thickly populated with no other hospitals. And are there not many such places in our South Asian region? Every country has places where population is large and there are no hospitals. And by a series of circumstances, we were led to this hospital. So Makunda was started in the 1950s as a leprosy hospital. It was a leprosy colony on 1,000 acres of land. In the 1980s, the missionaries who ran the hospital were asked to leave India, and they were not allowed to return back. And for the next 10 years, the hospital was closed. So when we went there in 1992, this is what we found. Maybe some of you are working in hospitals which look like this. So what can we do? So this hospital had no electricity, there was no running water, there was no money and no patients. And the staff who were there had been collecting their salaries by selling away various equipment. And they had been collecting their salaries without doing any work. And now it was very difficult to ask them to work. So that was the situation in 1992. But by the grace of God and by the hard work of many highly committed and motivated people who joined us, today Makunda is really well equipped. We are self-sufficient, and that is the part of the present team of staff who run Makunda. I have also stepped down from administrative responsibilities, and there is another team which is now running the hospital. So these are the statistics for the last year, and you will see that for a 200-bedded hospital, we have quite a large number of deliveries and other procedures. So that is God's blessing. And that is what I would like to tell each one of you. A hospital that was closed with enormous problems is today a thriving community by the grace of God. So all that is required is for people like you and me to be willing to go and take God by his hand, and he will take us through. So Wikipedia gives this definition for a missionary. And as you can see, a missionary is sent into an area of need. And we are those people who work in healthcare. So medical missions are God's instruments of care in a world of need. So there is enormous need around us. Very often we do not see the need, but there are poor people who die of easily treatable conditions in the prime of their youth simply because they cannot access adequate health care. So medical mission work in Asia started in the 1830s, primarily in China and in India. And colonial powers, most of them Western countries, they established and they aided these hospitals. And for a long period of time, they were managed by staff from abroad, and they were funded by churches from abroad, until slowly, one by one, each nation became independent. And many of these hospitals closed because there was loss of support. And there were not enough adequate local leadership to take over the work. In some of our South Asian countries, mission hospitals were nationalized by the government. Today, some hospitals are doing very well, but others are sick. So what is the potential of mission hospitals? They help to close the gap in access to healthcare. So when I mean close the gap, if you look each year, millions or billions of dollars are spent on healthcare. But each year, the same population accesses that resources. And another population is deprived of those resources. And year after year, there is a population in each of our countries which is unable to access healthcare. So why are they not able to access? Because they live in remote areas, because there is no money, because they belong to marginalized communities, and because there is no awareness of health. So the government facilities do not access them, often because politically the best hospital care in the government is given by some states. Like in India, the healthcare facilities in the state of Kerala in South India, the maternal mortality rate is almost like that of New York City in the USA. But there are other places in India where the maternal mortality rate is similar to sub-Saharan Africa. So because of all these factors, there is a great variation in healthcare provided by the government. The healthcare is also provided by corporates, but they are not interested in the poor and needy because there is no money for them. And it is in this place, in this situation, that a large number of people fall through the gaps, that they are not able to access any form of good quality healthcare, and that is where our role lies. Mission hospitals were established with the motive of service. The corporate hospitals, their motive for existence is to increase investor value or to make profits. And we have the greatest opportunity for transformational impact in the communities that we serve. So when I mean by transformational impact, I mean people who were not accessing healthcare in the past are now able to access. So that is transformation. And small investments in manpower and finance and infrastructure produce disproportionate improvements in healthcare indices. So if the maternal mortality rate is 500, it can quickly be brought to 400 without too much of investment. But if it is only 60, bringing it down to 50 needs many crores of rupees. Mission hospitals are God's ambassadors in a suffering world. And therefore, sick mission hospitals should be revived and new ones must be started. So I just wanted to tell that for the next 3 days, I would like to say that all of us are medical missionaries, even if we are students. So let us assume that we are running a hospital or that we are going to run a hospital, and let us imagine what it takes. So I just want to spend some time on this passage. I think all of us have read Hebrews chapter 11, and it is a honor roll of great men of God, men and women of God, and their names are recorded. So it is not our knowledge and our skills which produce the greatest fruit, but it is our attitude. It does not matter who we are and what our qualifications are, but do we have the right attitude? So if you look at this Hebrews chapter 11, there are many stories, and I will just go through a few of them. So Noah was asked by God, go and build an ark. Not only he was told to build an ark, he was given exact measurements, what type of wood should be used, and he was told that this ark is going to be built for a flood that is to come. In those days, people lived for hundreds of years, and it is quite possible that the actual flood came about 100 years after Noah got this instruction from God. What do you think people thought of Noah? There he was building an ark. Year after year, the rains came on time, and the summer season came on time, and there was no floods. They must have thought that he was quite mad. They must have also thought he is wasting the family's resources. But Noah did not think so. He had a message from God and he was going to fulfill it. And that is the same for each one of us. If we are going to be successful as medical missionaries, we need to overcome pressure from home, from our classmates, from our colleagues, and overcome their ridicule. In my home, when I was small, I did not go to church, and my parents were very unhappy with me. And then when I was in college, I attended a evangelical meeting, and there I gave my life to Jesus Christ and started to attend church. And everybody now was happy. A few years later, I had decided that God wanted me to enter medical missions. So when I told people that I hope to work in a faraway place, I was told, now you are going too far. You are becoming an extremist. Can't you stay back in Chennai? Don't you care for your parents? I tried explaining that this was something I was really convinced about. This was something which would make a major difference in the lives of other people. And finally, I had to run away from home shortly after my internship to join a mission hospital. I do not suggest that you should do the same, but maybe at some point in time we may need to go against parental and peer pressure to fulfill God's purpose in our lives. Then there is the story of Abraham. Abraham prayed for many years that he would have a son. And finally, in their old age, Abraham and Sarah were given Isaac. I always used to wonder why God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. And I think maybe to Abraham, Isaac had become too important. And maybe he was giving God second place in his life. And so God wanted to test him. So in our lives, do we have Isaacs? Something that is diverting us from God's plan and purpose for our life. It could be our career. It could be a relationship. It could be something that glitters that we are fascinated about. But until that Isaac is sacrificed on the altar, our lives cannot come out to its full potential. Abraham was also known for his instant and complete obedience. He lived in tents so that the tent can be folded and he could be on his way quickly. He did not put in any deep roots anywhere. It was not that he did not have the money to build a permanent residence, but he chose a type of life which adapted well to instant and complete obedience. And Dr. Arul Ankatel was talking about Moses. So Moses could easily have been the next Pharaoh, but instead he decided to go after the despised Israelites. So too, we are sent to people away from our families to take them in as our people, our nation, and work for them. It is also written about many people who faced great persecution. Compared to that, all our difficulties are temporary and trivial inconveniences. When Western missionaries first went to Africa, most of them were dead in 8 months. The children died on the way. The wives died a few months later. And then the missionary himself died because of the climate, the diseases, and because of war. And compared to that, today our inconveniences are the postponement of some of our ambitions, maybe the denial of some of our wishes. And in exchange for that, we are given great rewards in heaven. And this passage closes in the first and second verses of the 12th chapter, where it says that there is a great cloud of witnesses reaching out to us, egging us on, and saying that, go on, we too went through all these difficulties. And if you can go on, then you will be welcomed back as good and faithful servants who fulfill God's purposes in this world. So some points to consider for our success as missionaries. We cannot change everything. In our personal lives, maybe there are certain characters which cannot be changed. In the place where we work, maybe there are certain things that cannot be changed. So change the things we can and live with those we can't. Major changes take time. So I told you about some of the major challenges that we faced in our hospital, and several of those changes took 20 years or 15 years to change. We often underestimate what God can do in the long term. We overestimate what He does in the short term. And when things don't happen in 6 months or 3 months, we give up. But we must persevere because the greatest changes take time. Mission work is the greatest investment of our life. When we put our money in the bank, we hope that it will gain a lot of value. In the same way, if we invest our lives wisely, we will have great treasure in heaven. Our life should be laid at our commanding officer's disposal, because then only his power can flow through us. And just as we make a vow during our marriage, in sickness and in health, until death do us part, the same way we should make a vow to single-mindedly choose to serve him. And if we can do all that, we will have a fruitful life in this world and recognition in heaven. So we need to count the cost of investment. So many times there is uncertainty, and uncertainty always follows the missionary. If you look at mission life histories from across the world, that was one of the greatest constants in everybody's life. Nobody knew what would happen next. But we know a great certainty that whatever may happen, God holds us by his hands and he walks with us. And therefore, there is nothing to fear in the road along which we are led. We need to take up our cross. And what is our cross? It is the battle between the Holy Spirit living in our life and our own spirit. We need to deny what our spirit is asking and purposefully hand over each area to the control of the Holy Spirit. And if we can do that, not once, but every day, and if we can follow, then our work as individuals and departments and institutions and nations will have great value. We must have an eternal perspective in our life. Time is short. We do not know how many years more will be given to each one of us. I can say I have lived 56 years. How many more will be given? I cannot, I have no assurance about how many more will be given. Our opportunity to do something of eternal value passes by with each passing moment. So let us not waste our time, but with fortitude and with purpose, move steadfastly along the path that God is leading us on. So this is Jesus' invitation. And before that, he had performed a great miracle before ordinary fishermen. So too, I feel that each one of you here today have been touched by God in some way in the past. So there has been a point of engagement with Jesus. And that is why you are in this group today. And he is asking us to join him in something that is larger than us. I don't want you to be catching fish. I want you to be doing a much greater work. Not just be doctors or nurses or paramedicals, but be transformers of communities. So we have been asked to think of a much greater dream than we could imagine. So are we willing? This is a path that few take. Most of our friends, relatives, and family will abandon us because they have a much broader path that everyone else is following. And we will have few companions on the way. But if we choose the path less trodden, then we have God for company. He will live inside us and guide us and bring out much fruit. If you read through the first 3 chapters of Revelation, we hear the story of the 7 churches. This verse is not written for unbelievers. It is written for people like you and me. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Are we willing to open the door and allow God into our lives to take full control of our thoughts and words and actions? And that is our invitation. So as we close this first session, I would like to ask to each one of us, if I continue to go in the way I am going, where will I reach? Am I willing to take that less trodden path? Where is God wanting me to go? And if I should go there, should I make any course corrections? Am I willing to allow Jesus to take me by my hand and lead me along the best possible path? See, very often we think of all the options and we say, this is the best way. But God knows much better. Not only what is the best way, but what will happen 20 years from now, 50 years from now. So is He not the best person to give our hands, to accept and to follow? So we need to ask, what exactly do you want me to do? So in the next session, I'm going to talk about something called a SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Each one of us is a unique creature. So I have certain internal strengths which somebody does not have. For example, I am a good person for logical analysis of something. But I have weaknesses. And what is my weakness? One of my weaknesses is I'm not a very social person. I'm not very good at talking to people and cracking jokes and things like that. And I face certain threats. One of the threats I face maybe from my parents or my family. Maybe they don't want me to do what I really want to do. I have opportunities because I have certain qualifications. So now I have a better picture of myself. I have analyzed myself and I know who I am. And then I start developing my strengths and working on my weaknesses, exploiting the opportunities and overcoming my threats. And then I start asking God, Lord, now that I am like this, which is the best place where I will fit? And when we sincerely ask, God is not a God of confusion. He is a God of very clear certainty and purpose. And the answer will appear before you. It may not be a vision or anything extraordinary, but you will soon have peace and contentment that this is exactly what God wants you to do. And one step at a time. I only knew I was supposed to go into a mission hospital. I did not know where. I joined a mission hospital in Tamil Nadu, in my own home state. But soon it was clear that that is not the place. I should go north. I worked for 2 months in Maharashtra, in Western India. And then I felt that that was also not the place. And now I am at peace. This is my place. So one step at a time, we will be led to the right place, to the right person to marry, to the right specialization to do. All our major decisions will be clearly revealed to us. There is a saying by a famous British missionary. So he was asked, you keep on treating poor people, so how will your hospital survive? So he said, when I treat the poor, God will pay their bills. So sometimes there is no logic in what we do, because God's way of doing things is beyond our logical analysis. So all we simply need to do is do what is asked of us, and everything else, sustainability and getting people to come and work in a remote place, finding favor with governments and various other people, resolving of various severe problems, all this is in God's hands. We simply need to do our job one day at a time and leave the rest to Him.